Whoa!
Welcome to the What's Up Verdict podcast. We fashion ourselves cinematic judge and jury. My name is JJ Crowder. I'm here with my co-host, Alec Burgess.
Let's get it.
We appreciate you tuning in. Go ahead and hit that follow, subscribe, like, bell notification buttons. Tell a friend about us. Tell a person struggling with anything about us, because this episode, I think, is going to be pretty funny. Just going to throw that out there. It'll probably make people feel good, no matter what situation they're in, because they can't be feeling worse than the two of us are right now.
Right. It is so bloody early. Charles, we're doing this for you.
Yeah, man. Like, there was a reason we quit recording on Saturdays. You're welcome, you son of a bitch. We love you. Yeah, so we are here to record and talk about the Guardians of the Galaxy Chapter 3, or Volume 3, forgive me. This is what happens on Saturday mornings as well. I screw up titles of movies.
We'll fix it in post.
Exactly. Well, we won't, but my good Fred will, because he takes care of us. Yeah, in fact, it's a good time to plug. We haven't ever plugged him, so I'm plugging him. Robbie
Is the man,
is the man.
the myth, the legend.
Yeah, so if you're ever needing some audio editing for your podcast, or I know he does other things as well in audio, he's kept us sounding pretty decently. I mean, he can't help what we say, but he certainly makes sure that the audio quality is there.
He can't
Yeah.
fix the root of the problem, but he makes it sound good.
Yeah, exactly. So go to on Fiverr, Robbie _Mortimer. Wow, I can't talk either.
Mortimer.
I know. Jesus, he'll fix that, I'm sure. Robbie _Mortimer. Yeah, he'll take care of you. Does a great job. He's so good that lately he's been super booked. So make sure that you get in there before the guy just is working on private contract all the time. So with that, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, it was released May 5th, 2023, which feels really weird because we saw it on the Thursday show, at least I did. So it feels like it's been out longer than technically it has. It was written and directed by James Gunn. It stars Chris Pratt, Bradley Cooper, Palm Clemente, Dave Bautista, Karen Gillan, Vin Diesel, Austin Freeman, Maria Bakalova, Sean Gunn, and Chakudi Iwuji. Still reeling from the loss of Gamora, Peter Quill rallies his team to defend the universe and one of their own, a mission that could mean the end of the Guardians if not successful. If you haven't seen this movie, it is just come out, so please, and you want to avoid spoilers, make sure you pause this podcast. Go watch this movie and come back and pick up where you left off, because we are going to spoil the shit out of this thing. Yeah, man, let's dive into this movie. Look, I'm going to start. So we have some topics we're going to cover, and I'm going to start with the question that I have that I felt like I was asking myself the entire time I was watching this movie, and that is James Gunn the new Zack Snyder? Okay, because listen, when Zack Snyder first hit the freaking, made it big, and I think about 300 when I think about Zack Snyder in the early, and then I go to Man of Steel, which is kind of a controversial movie in a lot of eyes as far as Superman goes, but I really enjoyed Man of Steel, and I loved 300. Like, that was one of the most entertaining movies because it was so different. The visuals were interesting, and he did a great job of kind of changing up how we look at moments. But the problem with Zack Snyder, in my opinion, is that he became very predictable in that and I've said this many times, it became all about the moments. Like, how can I make these big visual moments or these huge emotional moments? But the problem with that is, and this is where I think James Gunn is starting to get himself in trouble, is I think back on him, we reviewed you know, the new Suicide Squad that he did for DC, and now this movie. And even in times like volume 2 of Guardians was really good. Like, I love Guardians 1. It's up there in my top 5 Marvel movies because it was so different. It was hilarious, like it was fun, it was emotional, and even part 2, what for a sequel, was really good. Like, there was very little that I was like, this sucks. But it was still a sequel, so it wasn't as good as the first. But this one, man, I was struggling in the theater to find things that I was really enjoying, and I felt the reason is because it was very Zack Snyder-esque. He took all the things that made him popular and things that like people love about what he does in his movies, and he ramped it up to like 100, and it didn't work as well at that level of James Gunn. Does that make sense? Like, and it's such a struggle for me, like, in that moment to go, man, I'm thoroughly enjoying this movie, because I was like, they're just trying too hard in a lot of moments, in my opinion. That was my issue with movies. It felt like they were trying too hard to capture the magic that they've caught in every movie that the Guardians were in. Guardians 1, Guardians 2, the Infinity movies, because they were great in all of that. And then in this movie, I'm like, it just felt forced in a lot of areas.
That's funny because I had pretty much the same exact thought, and I blame you and your incessant moments versus scenes, because I was watching it, and I mean, yeah, we have a bunch of phenomenal moments in this film that are so great, but it almost, as you like to say, didn't earn that payout because it was just kind of slopped up together and thrown in because this we're going for the reaction, we're going for the emotional pull, and we're going to throw this moment in. It's going to hit them. It's going to be great. And so, I mean, sometimes it worked. And then other times I was like, whoa, like what happened there? Why, who? Um, and it did come off, you know, now that you bring it up, very much like a Zack Snyder. You know, this worked before, we're going to do it again, but this time we're just going to ramp it up to 1,000 and send it to the moon. And so when it worked, it worked.
Yeah.
But it when it didn't work, boy, I was sitting there going, JJ's going to have a field day with this.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and that, you know, that, I mean, it ties together my 2 points that I wanted to talk about. And that is, when it was good, though, damn, it was
phenomenal.
Great. Yeah, it was outrageously good. And the best moments, in my opinion, were the Rocket flashbacks. Like,
oh, hands down.
Wowza. And then obviously, like, anytime they stopped trying to be funny, like overly funny, the movie was great. It was the forced, and then there were moments of comedy that were just gold, like absolute gold. It was just when it was like you could tell that they were writing in too much, and that I was like, this is Zack Snyder shit. You know what I mean? But man,
Yeah.
when they got it right, did they ever get it right?
And I think that kind of goes with a little bit of the saga that they paint themselves into, right? Because they come out, first movie, just the opening sequence is, in my opinion, the funniest thing in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And then you kind of have this history where the Guardians of the Galaxy are goofballs. And they're goofballs that, despite their royal fuck ups, get the job done. And then you have that contrast with, you know, Rocket's backstory, and there's this feeling, and, you know, how do you kind of stay within the realms of, you know, people go to see the Guardians of the Galaxy movie because it's funny, while telling this backstory that is super emotional and really, you know, yanks on the heartstrings. And, you know, that was something for me, is like I had these jarring emotional transitions where, I mean, I appreciate humor. I appreciate bad humor. I appreciate intelligent humor. I just like to laugh. And at some points when I was laughing, I was like, why am I supposed to be laughing here? Or is this, you know, are they going to yank something out from under me? And it just felt like it was going back and forth like a yo-yo. to where I was like, laugh, don't laugh. Oh shoot, I missed the laugh. I'm gonna laugh anyway. Because it was just so back and forth and up and down, and the roller coaster was there, but it wasn't seamless, and it wasn't kind of an easy transition in between. It was like turn the light switch off, turn the light switch on, and that was like half the movie. I was sitting there going, and this is a little uncomfortable, but not in like the good way.
Yep. And I think it's interesting because I think a good example of like the too much is Nathan Fillion in this movie. Because you brought it up as one of your topics, the Orgo Corp shenanigans, because this is one that I felt like I had whiplash. Because when it was funny in the Orgo Corp, like I was dying, like tears running down my face funny. But 90% of Nathan Fillion was unnecessary, and it added no value other than having Nathan Fillion in your movie. And they did they overdid, because I will say that the one part, like when Quill was like, he's the boss's nephew, he's kind of, and that first moment where he's like, oh, dude, I got one of those. I lost it. Because I kept imagining, I was like, how many times have my friends had that conversation talking about me? You know what I mean? Yeah, we got one of those. You know what I mean? Like, and so I loved it. But then the second time they did the joke, I'm like, okay, it only works once.
Yeah, especially with that, you knew it was coming the second time around.
Yeah,
which is the problem. It was telegraphed from a mile away. But the first time, you're thinking, oh, how are they going to get out of this? And it's, oh yeah, I got one of those right there. You I like. You're great, phenomenal.
Yeah,
you suck. And it works. But then when you telegraph the second round, it's like it doesn't need to be there. We've already gotten the joke. You did a great job. Now back out while you're ahead. But yeah, the whole Orgo Corp sequence, it was hard because on the one hand, they have this playing out as, rockets on his last 18 hours or whatever it is, right? And then you play that side by side with the humor that's going on, and then throw in the dramatic fight scene. Like, I think one of my favorite jokes was, when Mantis gets the guard to fall in love with Drax, and that whole byplay.
That's fair.
It was so funny, but at the same time, like, why are they? This doesn't feel like they're on a heist to get the code to stop a kill switch.
Yeah,
right. It feels like they're back in volume 1 where they're going after batteries.
Yeah,
and so it just feels a slight disconnect, to where it just doesn't make sense to me almost. And so I while I was laughing, I was like, why is this in the movie? This isn't a funny part.
Yeah,
like, this is do or die.
Yeah,
and it's and I guess that's part of like the Guardians MO, right? Is that kind of YOLO attitude.
it's true.
But then it was hard to reconcile that with, you have the scene at the beginning where Quill is drunk and violent and just kind of out of control. It doesn't fit. Like, it's all these different puzzle pieces that look like they fit, but they don't.
Yeah.
And so when you put them all together, I was like, well, what about this? What about that? And for anybody who's like, oh, you're overly critical. Yes, I am. With anything that is attached to Disney, I am exceptionally overcritical. But yeah, like the whole Orco scene, I was kind of get rid of this almost in a way. And you don't change the outcome of anything that happened, other than Nathan Fillion doesn't get to be in the movie.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. Like, there were some great jokes that could have been, because they could have done that. Because you're right, her making somebody fall in love with Drax was hilarious. Especially because, look, Dave Bautista is secretly one of the funniest freaking dudes on the planet. Because this guy, I mean, the way he just puts his head down, and you can tell she's done this shit before.
Well, they say it before because she makes him fall in love with his socks all the time.
Yeah.
And he's like,
great.
oh man.
Yeah, it was so good. But they could have done it anywhere. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? There could have been any moment. In fact, it might have even been funnier if they'd done it with one of the weird animal people on,
Counter Earth.
Counter Earth. And so I'm with you. I think Orgo Corp was like, how do we do so? And a very fucking Zack Snyder thing. How do we make this visually stunning moment where everything looks a little different and it's visually cool and everybody's got the bright colors and like the weird, gross, organic, you know,
Yeah.
planet kind of thing, base thing. And so I'm with you. Like, I feel like it was a way, but again, I think that was the downfall of this movie is the overindulgence of James Gunn trying to be James Gunn. And he, this has worked. And so now we need to do more of that. Well, no, you need to do just the right amount like you have in the first two. And now you overdid it. And that's fine. It doesn't make the movie terrible, but it certainly distracts from which should have been a very emotional movie. And it had its moments. And I think that's where I'm with you. Like, I was frustrated too, because there was a couple of things, and I know we have on the list to talk about Zoe Saldana, so we can talk about Gamora in the moment. But I'm also like, this is a movie, and the Guardians are always going to be funny, which I appreciate. And part of the reason that they're so funny, in my opinion, is because they're naturally funny in moments because it's natural funny. It's them being themselves, and so it comes across as hilarious. Drax doesn't his his race of people don't find they're very literal like they talk about in the first one. Like they don't enjoy dancing. That's why like he was watching Baby Groot at the end of the first one and he was like because they don't like dancing. Like they're a very serious alien race. So the fact that his jokes land because he's trying to be serious, or when he's laughing, it's not really funny except to him. That's what makes him funny. But we're in a moment where, like you said, Rocket's on his last legs, like who is the glue that holds this team together. He may not have built the team, but he's the one that connects with everybody, right? And here we are going all over the bloody universe. I needed to feel some more urgency about and I was getting a little weirded out because I honestly thought maybe James Gunn would actually kill off a character, which I would have been okay with. I mean, I don't mind that they spoiler alert didn't, but I would have been okay with it if
Oh,
they
I think
had.
it would have improved it by far.
Sure. I mean, I think it would have added some serious level, but at the same time, they dragged ass so long, I would have been like, it's your own fault.
There was so many close calls too when you think about it, whereas like they almost did it.
Yeah.
Drax got blasted. Probably should have died. Nebula got torn to pieces.
Yeah.
In several occasions, and it's like somewhat. I mean, Groot was ahead at one
Yeah.
point. He grew that body back real fucking quick. Took
Yeah,
him
like
a whole movie to get to where he was from a root, but apparently if
took him
the
like
head
3
survived,
movies. He was a baby in one, and then he was a teenager in another, and then it's like it took him a whole fucking. I'm like,
yeah, but he just popped back out, and I was like, because it was that almost like they wanted to add that urgency, like you said, and that the stakes are high, but I wasn't buying it.
Yeah,
because they backed up every single time. So spoiler alert again. When they get to the point where Rocket's kind of in limbo, I was like, he's not going nowhere.
Yeah.
There was no kind of tension there because I knew they weren't going to do it.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and it was frustrating too because like it was such an emotional. Because I've been looking forward to that emotional moment where you see in the trailer Chris Pratt like screaming next to the body of and you don't know it's the body, but you see the tubes coming out, so you assume whoever's hurt dies. And I mean, I guess technically, right?
Yeah.
He dies on the table, but it lost some of its oomph because a minute ago he's being carried by Gamora getting bounced around the damn ship. I'm like, look, dude, this dude's about dead. He's not hooked up to any of the tubes or anything anymore. And he's getting thrown around like a rag doll. Like, how's this dude still breathing?
Yeah.
So it was, it was just a struggle in that moment. That moment didn't add any value. I think they should have found a different way to find, I think they could have done something where it's his grandpa that was dying, or it was somebody that added value to one of the characters, but not enough. Like even make it Kraglin that's dying, or you know what I mean? Like somebody who didn't play a huge part in the movie anyway and was enough to get everybody to go out and do it. But I don't have the emotional attachment, or they don't have the emotional attachment to this person that makes me go, they're going to be, you know what I mean? They're okay taking their time or dicking around in the midst of it all. I just think they chose the wrong person to be dying. But how else do you get the flashbacks?
They chose it for the emotional flashbacks, and that's the thing is like this movie doesn't fit together with what they're trying to do almost, and so it's just slopped up there. And this will work. We'll make it work. We'll make the pieces fit.
Yeah,
and it kind of does, but there's enough cracks in it where it's like, this would have made it so much better. Like I pointed out, I would have loved the fact if his grandpa was dying.
Yeah.
Like, then you have this regret, this emotional thing. Everybody does leave with Quill. And it just makes more sense and fits more into the story that they're trying to tell. But yeah, like going back a little bit to Zoe Saldana.
Yeah.
I was like, why is Gamora in this other than it's Zoe Saldana and she's great?
Yeah.
And so it was one of those other things where it added stuff that doesn't need to make it isn't needed to make the movie move ahead because she's with the Ravagers now. She's off on her own thing.
Yep.
And so it's just like,
well,
so many missed opportunities.
Yeah. I think it would have been like, I liked the dynamic of Gamora being like, quit being a baby, right? Like, and I think it would have been better if she either, like with you, she wasn't in the movie, but we know that was never going to happen. Thankfully, to a degree, because it's Zoe Saldana. She's amazing. And Gamora is such a big part of the Guardians. And the fact that they brought her back in, Endgame means we have to include her, right? And she's such a big part of the Guardians. But I think keep her with the group, but have her be a complete dick. Like she was through most of this movie. And have it part of this movie be her emotional, like it was. But we don't need the part of, instead of Quill being an emotional freaking joke for the first 5 minutes of this movie and an absolute, in his cups and can't even walk around and mean, and have him just be awkward because he's trying to recreate the emotion and the relationship that he had with Gamora with a different Gamora. And because some of that was comedy gold too, because he's like trying to win her over, trying to reprimand her for not being his Gamora. And like some of that was funny, but I'm with you. I feel like she was wasted. Or have her be the one that comes in instead of, like I said, if it's Kraglin that's dying, now it's Gamora and the Ravagers that can come in and drive nowhere, go to nowhere, drive them. They're the ones that she comes in and saves them. And it keeps Zoe Saldana out of the movie for a while, but she was barely in it anyway. The only part that she was really impactful in this whole movie was when she was fighting friggin' Adam Warlock, which wasn't even a fight. It was more of her getting her face scraped all over the freaking ship. And anyway, yeah, I'm with you. The Bowie.
Yeah, it was just, I was disappointed because she was almost relegated to cameo.
Yeah.
And at that point, don't put her in.
Yeah, or put her in at the very end or something, but don't try to make her a major character.
Yeah. So that was frustrating because it was, once again, just jarring, didn't fit, didn't need to be there, added stuff, but unnecessary stuff. All for a kind of lackluster performance. Not by Zoe Saldana, but as, the Gamora character in the movie.
Sure.
So, yeah.
So I had another. Okay, and this one's nitpicky because of the comics. And I get what they look, it makes sense to me, but it bothered me so much that it pulled me out of the movie, and that is Adam Warlock.
This is good because I had a similar thought, but I didn't know enough about the comment to comment on it.
And and I should have put Will Poulter as one of the but I'm still so mad about the portrayal of Adam Warlock that I was like, I can't add Will Poulter. And look, Will Poulter does a great job. He's a great actor. He's funny. He's really good. But this is not. And look, I understand. Let me preface this again with spoilers that they show that the High Evolutionary pulls this Adam Warlock out of his cocoon early, which hurts his development, right? So, but I had a hard time with Adam Warlock being a moron. Like, because he's a pivotal character in the comics in the Infinity Gauntlet saga. Okay. They couldn't get him into the movies and bake him in time to make him part of the Infinity Saga of movies. But he's a huge character and he's a troubled character. His biggest enemy in certain stories in the comics is himself, a different version of himself. In the original version of Adam Warlock, he had some schizophrenia issues where he had like some personality disorder things. So like, he's a very troubled character. But he's not an idiot. You know what I mean? Like, he's not a fucking child. And so I had a hard time with that portrayal. Now, he's also one that goes back and forth between, is he good? Is he not good? And he is part of this group, that we've seen in the past with, yeah. I mean, I just was disappointed in the portrayal because I've been looking forward to Adam Warlock being in it. I was excited by Will Poulter playing him, and then the way that they portrayed him, I was like, this doesn't do any justice to Adam Warlock. Now, I'm hoping, as we saw the post-credit scene or the mid-credit scene, that they're able to pull him in some way, shape, or form and make him a version of Adam Warlock that I can appreciate. But it was so, and again, this is a me thing because of my comics background, but I was so disappointed in how they portrayed him, even though they tried to explain it with you pulled him out of his cocoon too early. It was a huge distraction for me throughout this movie, the portrayal of him.
It felt, for me anyway, it felt like they were trying to recreate Dave Bautista's Drax and make him overly literal, misunderstanding, and just kind of a, I don't know, dumb meathead. But it didn't work because you already have Drax.
Yeah.
You don't need another one.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, probably the biggest issue I had with it was when he vaporizes the guy. Right. And then that whole thing was to get him to counter Earth. But he vaporizes some dude to where there's nothing but bones left. But somehow this guy's electronic communicator is perfectly fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then he stops being able to disintegrate people later.
Yeah. Like, have him rough the guy up, because we've already seen he's, pretty much Superman.
Yeah.
And so I don't need him to misunderstand and vaporize some random Ravager. Like, have him throw a couple punches at this dude.
Yeah.
And I'd be much better for it. But it just felt like they were trying to recreate Drax. This goes back to what we said at the beginning with James Gunn. This worked really well. Let's do it again.
Yeah.
If it worked once, it's bound to work twice.
Yeah. We love likable idiots. Let's put two of them in this movie.
And it just didn't work.
No.
Which is a bummer because I like Will Poulter too.
Love him.
Even though he's kind of been relegated to D-list acting.
Yep.
Like, he knows his stuff. He's good. He shows up. He gives solid performances. But I mean, with what he had to work with, I think he did a great job with it. But it wasn't. It didn't work once again because, like we've been talking about, it almost felt like they couldn't make up their mind. Yeah. Emotionally heart-wrenching movie or likable idiot. And it shows, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, and they had so many, I don't know. He gets so many good actors because, again, just like another phenomenal actress that was wasted in this movie is Elizabeth Debicki as Aisha. She was great in part 2 as like this side villain.
Mm-hmm.
And she is an outrageous actress. Like, she is so fucking good. And in this movie, I'm like, again, she wasn't even like, she was just in it to make sure that Adam Warlock could be in it. And I was like, oh my God, it did not work for me. But that brings me to, before we start wrapping up with the curtain call conversation, but what brings me to another is who got me was Chukwudi Uji, the High Evolutionary. Absolute phenomenal villain. I wish
I agree.
he was still around, because the amount of like just I don't give a shit and the just raw psychosis that this man played this character with, I loved everything about that villain. And that was all down to that performance. From the beginning, like when you first see him with Rocket as a baby and he's like sweet and kind and being nice, and then he just, this progression of just pure villainy, of down to the line when he's the line at the end when they talk about God and he's like, there is no God, that's why I stepped in. I was like, what a fucking great line, and what a way to deliver it, because you're like, this guy really believes that. Like, there is no if, ands, or buts. He's played this part to the point where you're like, nope, he's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, and he's dangerous and he's powerful, and I love every moment. Yeah, he was one of the highlights of this movie for me.
Yeah, and you can add him to the list of villains that Marvel absolutely wasted.
Yeah.
And that's like the 4th, 5th one in a row?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where you have these great villains that come in for one movie, get the crowd or get the audience so enraptured, everybody loves them, and then kick them to the curb, they die in that same movie.
Yep. Well,
And
especially from a franchise that's had so many villain problems at its early days.
Yeah.
Now you're getting rid of the most intriguing and powerful ones that I'm like, I want to see more of this character.
And it's not like you couldn't have gotten away with having him sneak off somewhere.
Sure.
Like, it's completely doable.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't take the opportunity, and I was sitting there because I had the same thing. And I was like, oh, this guy kind of is a couple cuckoo short of a full clock.
Yeah, dude.
But he's also got kind of the power base to support his crazy dreams, for lack of a better term. And it is intriguing. It's like, how are you going to take this guy down? How are you going to beat him? He knows everything.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, okay, well, I guess you wrap it up once again, and just a little bit of a lame, not lame necessarily, but unnecessary or unneeded fight scene to show teamwork.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and don't get me wrong, like, I love the fact that Rocket outsmarted him again, like with the anti-grav boots, you know what I mean? That kept his gravity power from being a thing. Like, I loved that moment. And then he has I'm Rocket Raccoon. I'm like, this is amazing. It was one of those really great moments in the movie. And then even more so when they fucking destroy this dude together, which was great. And then they peel his face off, and you see what Rocket did when he just tore this guy to shreds early, in his memory banks, and then chose to let him live. Like, I was like, yes, they're going to let him live. And then they blow up the ship. And I suppose they never, in it, it's a Marvel or most movie thing. You don't see him die. So he could be, there's always a room for him to come back, which I hope they do. I just wish they would have shown him getting away. Like, show his mangled ass face using his, whatever powers to get out of this thing. And because I want to see him again. You know what I mean? Like, he's a villain I can get behind because he's scary. He's terrifying because you're like, this guy's unhinged. He'll do whatever to read. Like, we watched him blow up a planet. Guy doesn't care.
Just for kicks and giggles.
Yeah, just to start over again. That's a wicked one. Anyway, but that leads right into, and I'm going to start this conversation because you want to talk about the curtain call, and I love it, and it's a great thing to talk about in this. But I want to start with one of the like true wonderful fight scenes, action scenes that have been in any movie, let alone a Marvel movie. But the fight when they all come together on the ship, and you got after everybody finally gets together, they come in with the big old tentacle monsters, and then they have it's almost like a hallway fight from Daredevil.
Yeah.
In that big like bunker area, like the ship area of this fortress thing. Dude, what a great fight scene. It was so good. The action, the camera angles, like it was dope as fuck. And it just was a really good, for me, I'm like, oh, this is great. And I was like, you can't outdo this. And then again, to your point, even though the power of friendship was kind of overdone to a little bit of a degree, the absolute manhandling of the High Evolutionary was in the same vein of what we just got done watching, that when this team is together and in full go mode, dude, they will melt people down. And I really enjoyed that. And I think it really led into the ending of the movie, showing how the future of, or the lack of future, depending on how you want to look at it, of this particular version of the Guardians of the Galaxy. So
I agree, because it sticks once again with what we've seen in the previous Guardian movies. Like, they take on Ronan, they take on Ego. When they do it together, like, strength in numbers, and they work well as a team, and it fits and it makes sense, and it's amazing. Then they upped it with all the cool camera angles and everything. So I love that scene too.
mm-hmm.
But when I was watching it, this entire movie just felt like that curtain call.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of bummed, because I think it is, right? There's no Guardians 4 in the works yet. Or if there is, it won't be James Gunn.
Yeah, it won't be James Gunn. And there's certain actors that have said that they're like, Zoe Saldana's done, which doesn't hurt, because again, she didn't, as much as I love her, she's one of my favorite actresses out there, but she didn't really add any value to this movie for the most part. So I'm okay. And then Bautista, which really hurts the franchise as far as, because he's great, have both said that they're definitely done. And I think, I can't think of his name right now, but the Rocket voice, Bradley Cooper's done as well.
Yeah, so it feels like this curtain call right throughout the entire movie, and that's why they're cramming all these big emotional impacts in, because this is our last chance, go big, get remembered. And it separates, and this is the problem with creating like a cinematic universe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is every movie, film, edition has to play its part to tell a bigger story. And I think this is what phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 did really well with Marvel, is these pieces that add to this overall cinematic goal. After Endgame, I've been really lost in what is happening, and it seems to be a lot of standalone movies that are, this is going to restart this or start this off, but they're almost branched too far. Right? And then you get this one, which comes in, and this is just James Gunn putting his stamp on Guardians of the Galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and he's pulling this work. We're going to go big, fireworks, do all this. More action, more jokes, more humor. I'm going to go out with a bang. And it does, right? It goes out with a bang, but I'm sitting there, I'm like, was this a Guardians of the Galaxy movie, or was this James Gunn vanity project?
Yes.
Yeah. And so I was sitting there, and I'll tell you what really kind of irked me, because I'm a huge fan of old music, right? 70s,
mm-hmm.
80s, listen to it all time long. Classic rock, love it.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that the Guardians of the Galaxy kind of kickstarted this trend,
mm-hmm.
where you have this old music. And I mean, the one that gets me the most is when it's Fleetwood Mac in the second movie, where you first see Ego. And I mean, just everybody's starting to do it now, so it's a little bit overdone, but Guardians are the guys that kind of really put this into the mainstream.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there, and as they're ending this, not the mid-credit scene, post-credit scene, whatever it is, but as they're ending the film, they jump into a recent song. And I was sitting there, good song. Great song. Not mad about the song choice, mad about the attitude behind it. Yeah. And you could say whatever you want about like moving into a new era, new Guardians, a new decade of music, whatever. But I was sitting there, are you kidding me? What is this trash? Because it didn't make any sense to do it. And I'll just go ahead and spoil it. In the mid-credit scene, post-credit scene, whatever it was, where they throw back on Redbone.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, you know, full circle. That's a song they should have fucking played in Nowhere.
And then it would have been great if they had played the song that they play in Nowhere in the mid-credit scene.
In the mid-credit scene, where
because it still does what you're trying to do, right?
Yes, it's a new Guardians team.
Yep.
New Guardians team, new era, new music. I can get behind it. But I was sitting there, and I that was to put at the end of the movie. That's when I texted you, and I was like, "What do you think?" Because I was like, this is, you know, you have this theme and it works, and the song choices that they pick throughout the entire 3 movies make sense. Like even down to the Beastie Boys.
I know.
Make an appearance once again in a movie with Chris Pratt in it.
Yeah.
I was loving it.
Yeah.
And then you throw in a newer song, and I was sitting there, I was like, oh, why? You didn't have to do it.
Yep.
I mean, the whole curtain call thing, you know, was like building up, and I realized what this was, you know, pretty early in the movie. I was like, okay. And they get up. I'm like, oh, big finale, and then they drop that, and I was like, oh, that's bad, in my opinion.
Yeah,
right, like I said, nothing against the song, nothing against any of the. It's great song, but in this moment, for this time, I was, I would have done it differently.
Yeah, I really want. I'm with you. I wanted a true closeout of our current team, and then you, like you said, you just all you have to do is in the mid credits, you have them playing something new. It shows that transition to Rocket's leadership, to the new phase of the, you know, the younger, newer version of the Guardians, and we didn't need, you know. But I'm with you. They just did a swap at the wrong time. Even though I understood what they were trying to do, it didn't work for me as well. Especially after this big emotional scene where you get Groot using something other than I am Groot.
Right.
And I mean, you know, they're all together and realizing that they're all going to go their separate ways. And Rocket's the new, you know, head of the Guardians. And it was a really cool moment. And even the dancing, like watching Drax dance, and like, it was really cool. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
All they needed was to do, like, and it's such a nitpicky thing in that moment, but at the same time, I think it changes the emotional value of these 2 scenes. So anyway, and you brought up something that I said to Casey when we left the movie, and this is for Marvel, because you know, I've been trying to say, we talked a lot about Marvel and how phase 4, phase 5 just hasn't worked as well. And I've talked about the reasons that phase 1, 2, 3 worked so well was because of the way that they set it up. It was a lot of no-name characters. They got you emotionally attached to these individual characters or groups, and then they brought them all together. The problem I have been saying is, and this is the epitome of it, is we have a familiarity with some of these characters, and we're missing the ones that really held the groups together, right? And that's not necessarily Marvel's fault. That's just the transitions that we're in. But I told Casey when we got out of this movie, I said, I think if Marvel was smart, they wouldn't wipe the slate clean, but they would make it feel like they were going to. And they would start fresh with new characters, new movies that don't have any tie-in to our old Marvel phases. People are going to, but they're not going to reject it. They're going to reject it for now, but what it will do, they won't even, I don't think, reject it as hard as they have some of phase 4 and 5. But bring in these new characters and then have it as we get close to the culmination of phase 4, phase 5, phase 6 of these new characters battling together. Now bring back your old characters. Because again, we now have this emotional attachment to new characters, like we did with Iron Man, like we did with Captain America, like we did with the Hulk, like we did with Guardians of the Galaxy. And now you can bring in those legacy characters, tie them to this new universe that you've created that's similar to the early universe, so that we're not in this moment of we want new and exciting and interesting, but we want that tie into the old as well, because they're in this weird transition piece where I don't think you can do both. Because you're missing the parts. You're missing a lot of parts that made the legacy so good. So you're forcing things that just don't feel right, in my opinion. So you got to rebuild that core. Anyway, so it's just a thought that I had of they'd be smart if they just went, okay, we're done making movies that involve legacy characters. We need to build 3, 4, 5 movies that are new characters and that don't attach it. We can have the little Easter egg drops and things like that. And then as we get closer, we have some of these big movies where we bring back, the new Captain America. We bring back some of the old Guardians of the Galaxy. We bring, those characters that are still around, the legacy characters, we bring those back. But anyway, that was just a thought I had that might, how I would do it. Not that I'm anybody special other than a podcast host, but
I like your way, JJ, for what it's worth.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I watch enough movies and enjoy movies in a non-critical way enough that I was like, this is what I would think was pretty cool. And I'd have the questions, man, where's new Captain America? Where's Hulk? Where's Wong? Where's Doctor Strange? Where are all these characters? What the fuck are we doing? We just starting over them? And then I would go, okay, well, I guess they're starting over. Great. Let me learn about some new Marvel characters. And then all of a sudden in one movie, in a Shang-Chi movie, now all of a sudden
Wong shows up.
Yeah, Wong shows up. I'm like, fuck, this was awesome. You know what I mean? So that's anyway, that was just a thought that I had. But yeah, Guardians.
So here's the thought I just had that piggybacks off your thought. Could that have been what they were trying to accomplish with their shows? Introduce new characters, and they beans that up so bad that now they don't know what to do?
Could be.
I'll be honest, the Moon Knight TV show is one of my favorites.
Oh, it's amazing.
But no, I haven't gotten anything with Moon Knight since then.
Yep.
And now we're coming up on about a year? A little over a year since we've had any news of Moon Knight.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know if you ever watched Werewolf.
I did watch Werewolf by Night.
It's great.
Yeah.
And it was detached from everything, right? And those are the ones, if you think back, the things that are completely detached, because Shang-Chi was the same way. It was very detached with the exception of Wong, right? And Wong wasn't in it enough to change the whole movie. He was just in it, and it made sense for him to be in it due to the nature of the film, the fact that there was the Asian influence and where it was at, it was an Asian film, right? And the fact that there was a lot of mystical arts pieces, so it made sense for Wong to be there. But that was it, right? That was all you got was Wong and then some Easter eggs. I liked Shang-Chi a lot. Everything else, though, as far as movies, were either legacy characters or it was forced. They forced legacy characters into it to kind of bring it. And I'm with you. It hasn't worked. Not very well anyway. Whereas the ones that are detached and kind of standalone shit is what worked. And I know you hated it, but even for me, Miss Marvel, I enjoyed the majority of that show. I think the only one that I just couldn't handle was She-Hulk. And that was because that show just sucked, in my opinion. But
I still stand by my Miss Marvel, but I don't think I hate it as much anymore after what we've had to go through from Marvel.
Yeah. Anyway, here's the thing with this before we rate it, and that is to say that this movie could have been as good as the first two Guardians, in my opinion. But I'm with you. I think the circumstances really hurt it, and that being James Gunn's exit from Marvel, the fact that a lot of the Guardians aren't going to come back, the actors, because that's their choice, and I get that. I don't blame them at all. I will say that they did, with the post-credit scene, leave me very intrigued, because they hinted at the idea of the legendary Star-Lord comic series, which was interesting. Did you stay for the final?
I did. So when they said the legendary Star-Lord will return, that was
that's a series of solo comics.
Oh, okay. I thought that was just Chris Pratt's ego coming through.
No, yeah. So Star-Lord had his series of his own comics where it was the legendary Star-Lord, and so that's a direct tie-in. So I was like, that's intriguing. And Chris Pratt has had some interviews post release that have talked about, there's a chance I come back now that it's been announced that Star-Lord's coming back, but there's other versions of Star-Lord. So anyway, it's an interesting concept, and I'm excited I hope that they do a version, because I also love Chris Pratt in this movie. I like Chris Pratt most of the time, but in this movie, he's as Star-Lord, the guy's carried it. So I appreciate that. So I did get a little excited after that one. I was like, ooh, the legendary Star-Lord. That's exciting. But again, it goes back to, if you didn't fucking know what that meant, right?
Yeah.
I saw it and went, ooh. You went, fucking Chris Pratt and his ego.
Yeah. I went, that's Star-Lord's ego. Way to go.
Yeah. Fucking crazy. All right, let's rate this thing. Alec, you go first this time.
Damn it.
Uh-huh.
Oh boy. So I'm super torn with this movie, because to say it's a bad movie is wrong. It's not a bad movie. To say it's a great movie is also wrong, because it's not great. But the things that don't make it great don't necessarily make it bad. And I've been struggling with this. Like JJ said, we saw this Thursday night. I have been struggling with it since then on where to rate it. Because I love the humor, and we didn't really talk about it, but the whole bad dog joke.
Oh my God.
I was dying.
Hilarious.
I think they may have stretched it out just a teeny bit too long in some cases, but most of the time, every single break that they had to go back and tell this joke, I was dying with laughter.
Oh yeah.
Because it's so funny. And so that stuff I enjoy. I enjoy the stupid humor, but stupid humor that still has a purpose and a place is phenomenal. And so it's hard for me to put like a number on it, because I have, like we said at the beginning, when this was good, it was great. And when this was bad, it was horseshit. And so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go just slightly above middle of the road. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. I will watch it again. I don't want, people listen to this and say, oh, I'm not going to watch it. Go watch it. It is worth a watch. Just don't go in expecting necessarily cinematic gold, because you're not going to get it. But if you're looking for a laugh, looking for, a rip your heart out of your chest moment, this has got both. It's perfect. So I'm going to give it a 3. I definitely think it's worth the watch, but don't expect too much out of it. Probably the best way to put it.
Yeah. I think to just run into mine, piggyback on yours, and that is to say, I think this movie suffers from comparison syndrome, and that is the first two, in my opinion, were two of the best Marvel movies. One of the best Marvel movies in the first one, probably, if not the best, top 2 sequels within the Marvel cinema. You know what I mean? Because it was still, the second one was still so good. Comparatively, this one, because of how good the first two were, my expectations were super high. And for all the shit that I give James Gunn and the fact that I more or less hated the Suicide Squad movie he made, I felt some of that Suicide Squad shit that I criticize heavily in this film. So I think it's just the new direction that he's headed in. That being said, just like I said, we talked a little bit about the critical pieces of this movie, but there were some phenomenal parts of this movie. And I had a running joke that was killing me too, was did that look cool? Or, that looks really, but it looked cool, right? Like that shit was hilarious, because that's this group of people, right? Like they're like, but did it look cool? Like, or that was fucking dumb, but it looked cool. Like, and then the fact that, I was pretty surprised too, because it had Marvel's first fuck in it. And what a great moment. Just get in the fucking car. Or open the fucking door, or whatever it was. Yeah, like I was like, oh shit, they dropped the F-bomb in a Marvel movie. What a great. So I mean, there were so many things that made this movie good. But then there were so many things, and the worst part it wasn't even like a lot of it was bad. It just took away from what was great, because it was unnecessary, or it was overdone or forced. That's the conundrum of this movie for me, is that I don't think any of it was terrible. I just think that it wasn't good enough. So what was great wasn't as great as it could have been, because of the things that pulled you out or was distracting or was overdone. And so, and that all comes from, I think, the circumstance of what this movie had become because of all the situations with the actors and James Gunn and everything that's going on behind the scenes, which I really hate when movies suffer because of bullshit that's going on in the real world, especially ones that have the ability to be. This could have been a sequel that maybe even surpassed the original, in my opinion. With all of that said, I'm like you, like I have been beat. I was on with Mattson last night because he's back in town, and I was talking to him, and he asked me, how was it? And I'm like, fuck, dude, I can't answer that question right now. I'm still racking my brain with what, because he wanted, what are you going to rate it? I was like, I don't know. I have no fucking clue. And I didn't until this moment right now where I'm going to rate it. And I'm with you because I've been like, I don't want to overrate it because I don't want to say it's phenomenal, but I also don't want to shit on it because I had a good time watching the movie. So I'm going to go a step higher than you, as is my norm, and I'm going to give it a 3.5. I really, really wanted to give it a 4, but I just think the things that did pull it out and the overuse of a lot of unnecessary things really distracted me enough that I can't give it in that 4 to 5 range. I just can't. So 3.5 for me. I'm with you. I will watch it again when it hits Disney Plus, and I'll fast forward through some shit that I just don't care about. But I think the one thing that really got me was the emotional. And that's one thing that Guardians has always done is I'm like, how did it make me feel some shit when all this silliness was, and it did. Like in Rocket's backstory, fuck, that shit tore me up. It was great. So anyway, there it is. 3.5. Overall, pretty good movie. A lot of fun at the very least with some really great running gags. Because I won't lie, when Cosmo fucking freaks out at the end too, it's like, I knew you thought I was a good guy. I was like licking his face. It was great. I loved it.
Not even the Soviets called me bad dog.
Well, in the card game where like he just reiterated, he's like, she is a bad dog. And then like they all just go, fuck. Because all I could picture was like the whole time Cosmo running around going, take it back.
Yeah.
Or bitching to everybody. Craglin called me a bad dog. Yeah, it was great. I'm with you. Best joke in the whole fucking movie. So there it is. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Go watch it. It was fun. And it's worth seeing in theater visually because it is a gorgeous movie like all of them have been. So it was fun. All right, Alec, tell everybody where they can find us if they're not listening.
Happy to. Thank you for tuning in to our review of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. This one was a bit hard to put into a box, to say the least. We both had a very hard time reviewing it, so if you liked it or didn't, let us know your thoughts in the comments below, or send us an email to hosts@what'sOurverdict.com and let us know if you loved it or you hated it and why. If you are new to the pod, welcome, and go check out a good review. The boys did an episode on The Dark Knight a while back, so go watch that before judging us and come back again for another episode. We can be found wherever podcasts can be found, including Stitcher, Apple, and YouTube. Leave us a review or drop us a comment to interact with us because we crave the attention. Special thanks to our current patron, JJ's Left Nut. You kind of get the vibe for the community atmosphere from just that right there. You are amazing, and we did this quick turnaround for you, good sir. We appreciate all that you do. If you enjoy the content we put out and want a more direct role in the content that is released, there is a Patreon spot open for JJ's Right Nut. Plus, every dollar earned on Patreon goes towards funding Zarg Nut production in the US, so it's for a good cause. With that, I will kick it back to the King of Crash, the Great Bambino, a JJ.
Oh, I love it. That's another good joke. I ate them all. And then he eats another Zarg nut. Dave Bautista is a fucking comedic genius in these movies.
Their relationship was the best part of this movie.
Oh, yeah, dude. I love those two.
Get on the bike. We're going to go back to the ship.
Yeah.
You sure?
10 feet? Yeah. Drax. And then when they're like, what are you doing here? She just points at him. It's great. Oh, it's great. All right. Well, there it is. See, it had great parts. Man.
It did.
It did. All right. Well, with that, as always, we appreciate you tuning in. We'll catch you on the next one.
Hasta la vista, baby.
Cinemagic out.
Whoa!